Alright, man, this is the July 2023 Blu ray episode. Let's get right into it. And off to a great start, because we're starting over in the UK on July 3rd. One of my favorite films is getting released from 88 Films, The Untold Story.
Critically acclaimed. An instant cult classic. Written by and starring Danny Lee, star of John Woo's The Killer. And starring Hardboiled's Anthony Wong in the riveting performance that earned him the 1993 Hong Kong Film Award for Best Actor. Creepy. Demented. Darkly witty. Thrilling. And 100% fresh. Based, unfortunately, upon real events.
This is directed by Danny Lee and Herman Yao, and this film got a release as well in the States on Blu-ray from Unearthed Films, which is a fantastic release. It's got great features, including a feature-length documentary on Cat 3 films from Hong Kong, which was their rating system, like 18 plus sort of system. And it also talks about kind of the evolution of filmmaking in China and Hong Kong. I think that documentary was made not just for that release. I think it was already a documentary. Either way, this film I think is probably, I don't know if it's considered to be the best Cat 3 film, but I think it's ultimately up there. Maybe it may be the best Cat 3 film. I don't know. But anyways, this stars Anthony Wong, who you've seen in a ton of films. If you watch like Hard Boiled or films like that, you've seen him pop up. But I think it's based on, I don't know if it's partially based on or based on a true story of this serial killer who took over this pork bun kind of restaurant. And he's doing these horrific murders there. And what's so interesting about the film is I always hear people talk about with Wes Craven's Last House on the Left, you know, they have these horrific scenes of torture and violence and melancholy. And then you have these goofy, over-the-top, comical, almost Three Stooges-like moments with these bumbling, cops. Like, they go to sit on a truck and they fall off and the redneck lady's laughing at him. And you're like, well, this doesn't mesh well. These two things would never mesh well. And then you watch this film and you're like, oh my God, it meshes well. Because you have those scenes of carnage, but then you have these really goofy, great back and forth between these cops. There's a whole thing about like one of the cops like dressing up and stuff, and it somehow meshes together very well. I think in part because while the violence is horrific, the tone it's not light, but it's not as dour as something as Last House on the Left, where that film is very sad ultimately. The scenes with Marie and all them, and then when you get to the third act of the film is really when it ramps up, especially with the violence. But there's one sequence in particular that always stuck with me, and I forgot where I heard this. It may have been an interview on the Blu-ray or somebody else said this to me, but it was there's a scene where a bunch of people are chasing after Anthony Wong's character, and the director, whichever one, I think Herman Yao is the main director behind this, but don't quote me on that. But they said Anthony Wong has to get away from them, and he told everybody else, you have to get Anthony Wong. And it's one of the most memorable sequences in the film, where it is just true physicality, where every time you think he's down, he just keeps getting back up, and you cannot take your eyes off the screen. I mean, this is just such a terrific film. I imagine that the 88 Films release will be region locked if Unearthed has a copy here, and I'm not really sure about the features on this, but if you don't want to import it, I think the Unearthed Blu-ray is one of the best Blu-rays they've ever released, honestly. I mean, easily, I'd have to really think about it, what Blu-rays they've put out that have like more than that. I mean, that maybe like Serbian Film, I think, are the two strongest releases that they have in terms of features and transfer and the film itself. But anyways, yeah, that's coming from 88 Films. A film that is coming to Blu-ray in the UK but is not for a little while in America is a film I talked about this year, Godland, that I talked about and I liked a lot. I talked about it in relation to Ennis Men, and if you're interested in Godland, I would recommend listening to that episode because some of the comparisons between those films I found very interesting that I wasn't even aware of until I started recording it, or at least maybe not until I was recording it, but leading up to it, I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of comparisons there. This is coming to Blu-ray eventually from the new line of Janus Films titles that are supposedly coming at some point. I don't know what the updates are on that, but along with some other great films as well, like The Innocent and EO and The Eight Mountains, just, really terrific stuff. But if you don't want to wait and you don't have the Criterion channel, which this is available on in the States, this is coming from Artificial Eye, and I don't know. I got it up my phone right now, so I can't really see any features or anything like that. So you have to look at that on your own. But in America on July 4th is a film I talked about for the 1998 episode, and it was my number 3 favorite film of 1998, I believe. I don't remember. But it's Peter Weir's The Truman Show with Jim Carrey and Ed Harris. And this was a film that I had seen a couple times previously before that. I think I saw it in like high school and stuff, but it never really stuck with me. But when I watched it for that episode, it was like watching it again for the first time. And also being more aware of Peter Weir as a filmmaker. I've talked about Picnic at Hanging Rock on the show. It's one of my all-time favorite films. I love The Last Wave. I'm so happy to see actually getting a Blu Ray from Umbrella later this year. Definitely will be talking about that. But this film, for whatever, it just worked. Oh, we also did Fearless if you're looking for more of his American work with Jeff Bridges. But this film worked so much for me on the last time I watched this, man. I mean, it's primarily a drama more than anything else, but I think most people probably know about it. Jim Carrey, who lives in this kind of 50s suburban, picturesque neighborhood, is actually the star of this reality show that the whole outside world is watching. So basically, he's living in like this kind of dome, not even like a dome, but like a giant soundstage. He eventually kind of learns what's going on, not fully, but he's like trying to leave, and there's like problems. Like he tries to go to the travel agent, and the travel agent's like, oh, the flights are booked, and he wants to try to drive away, but the cops stop him. And ultimately, it's a film that could have either been really silly and comedic or really dour and depressing. But I think this finds a good middle ground where it's not overly comedic and it's not overly dramatic, but it's a really, really great character study. Not just of Jim Carrey's character, but of Ed Harris as well, who does have less screen time. But I think they do a lot with this character. And one of my favorite shots in the film is directly lifted from Ingmar Bergman's Persona, which is when Jim Carrey's character is sleeping on the giant TV that Ed Harris has on the wall, and he puts his hand on the TV, which is just a direct lift. But I love this film. I think this is just one of Peter Weir's best work in an already impressive filmography, and I will definitely be grabbing this at some point. I feel like this is a film that honestly Criterion or someone could have picked up. What did I say? Picked up? Good God, man. I got out of work, guys, so bear with me if I stutter over some of my words, like as I just did right there. But also coming from Shelf Factory is Leigh Whannell's 2018 film Upgrade, and this is an interesting film. It's not one that I loved. I thought it was a great premise that made for a pretty good film, but this is one that I've just heard people like say they love. I've never seen this on people's best of the year lists, and it's cool that Shout are doing some 4Ks of recent titles that have not gotten 4Ks for whatever reason. If the studio just wasn't interested, or they weren't financially successful or anything like that. I really have no idea how Upgrade did financially. I don't know if it bombed or it did good. But Leigh Whannell, I think, is an interesting writer-director. Obviously, co-writer, director with James Wan, who they did like the Saw films together, and the first Saw. I don't know if Leigh Whannell did The Conjuring as well. I'm not sure, but either way, Leigh Whannell is an interesting writer, filmmaker as well. His other film, Cooties, which I think he wrote and not directed, I really don't know, I think is fun, and I would have liked a sequel of that. It kind of leaves on a cliffhanger, but like Insidious Chapter 3, I think it's actually surprisingly pretty good. And Upgrade, I think there's a lot of really good stuff in it, and I doubt people like it. I mean, I just think it's pretty good. I don't really love it, but it is a cool film, and I really like that main actor a lot, whose name I'm blanking on right now from The Invitation. I saw him in something else. I'm probably going to blank on his name right now. From Universal Studios, getting Jaws 2 on 4K. I have not seen Jaws 2. All I know about the film, really, is that Roy Scheider was contractually obligated to be in this film because he dropped out of The Deer Hunter. I don't know if either before or during filming. I'm not sure. I read that in the Michael Cimino book. Yeah, I've not seen Jaws 2, but it makes me wonder if they'll put 3 and 4 in 4K as well. I don't know really what the reputation on this film is. I think it's not very good, but truthfully, I really couldn't tell you. I've only ever seen the first Jaws, and it's a film that I just, for whatever reason, have never been interested in the sequels. I like the first Jaws. It's a great film, but it's never been one of my favorites, so that's why. But, it's there. One of the films that Arrow is putting out, and it's good to mention this because by the time you're listening to this in July, it is going to be the Arrow sale, as well as the Criterion sale at Barnes & Noble. The Criterion sale kind of dominates July, but people forget that Arrow have their titles on sale as well. So if you want to pick up any of those box sets, definitely is the month to do it. But Fighting Back from 1982, I think this is a vigilante kind of film, but an acquaintance of mine got an early copy of this for his YouTube channel, and he was talking about it, and he made it sound really interesting. He likes the kind of films that I do, this kind of vigilante, Death Wish kind of films. I love all that stuff. I love revenge films and all that kind of stuff, and he was really talking about how much he liked this, and he hasn't steered me wrong before. He was the guy who he was hyping up Toys Are Not for Children, which from 70-something, 72 or 3, I don't know. And that's a film that I completely love, that I still feel like has not gotten its due, and that's also from Arrow Video. So keep that in mind with the month going forward. Let's see. I think these are steelbooks. Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol and Mission Impossible 3. They look like steelbooks as well. I don't actually know. I think those have had 4Ks before, but I'm really not sure. But it looks like that is going to be it on that day. So moving back into the UK on July 10th. Let's see here. The Circus Tent, coming from Second Sight. Not Second Sight, what the hell am I talking about? Is coming from Second Run, my bad, guys. I always like to mention their films. I'm usually not familiar with what they put out, but I love Second Run so much, and I love what they put out, and whatever they put out, I'll buy. It doesn't look like there's a lot on this day besides some brand new releases. It looks like it's a standard edition of Naked Lunch, as well as the Rainer Werner Fassbinder Collection Volume 3 are getting standard editions. So it looks like that's going to be it on that day, besides some new releases as well. Alright, back into the US. On July 11th, we're finally getting the long overdue 4K of After Hours from 1985.
So I haven't got enough money to get home until I meet this bartender who wanted to lend me the money.
That's all right, forget it. That's all right.
Poor boy.
So I go back to the girl's apartment, but her roommate's really pissed off at me for the way I treated her friend.
This the guy?
Hi. So I march right in there to apologize. Come on! But she'd already killed herself. I was too late.
Oh, wow.
Lighten up. What is this?
I'm in big trouble. Big trouble! Now this part, you're gonna say, oh, you're lying to me. Don't lie to me. But it's true. Mohawk this guy! I couldn't believe that. It's him! Tell him, it's not my fault. I didn't do it.
I gotta tell who you didn't do what.
Help! 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 Call the police!
What's with you? Are you nuts or something?
This film got announced for a Criterion release, I think, like 4 or 5 years ago or so. And actually, funny enough, I remember hearing about this, and then like a while after hearing about the Men Behind the Sun 4K that Massacre Video were putting out, and it was kind of a running joke of sort of like who was going to put the film out first, After Hours, Men Behind the Sun, and here's After Hours coming first, but then Men Behind the Sun is up for pre-order, But man, this is one of Scorsese's best films that I think is, over the last 10 or 20 years or so, has really gotten more of a reevaluation. This was made, I don't know if this was his follow-up to Raging Bull or was made really soon after, to my knowledge. Let me actually see here, because I want to make sure I got that right. Okay, this was his This was his follow-up to King of Comedy, which was the follow-up to Raging Bull. This was 85, Raging Bull was 1980. And it's funny to see kind of, even those three films together, the tonal kind of change, where Raging Bull is it's a beyond a masterpiece. It's a masterful, dark, upsetting character study. And then you have King of Comedy, which is a black comedy character study, which is also, I think, a absolute masterpiece, but a considerably lighter tone, depending how you look at it. It's a film you got to rewatch to really kind of get the tone of the film. But it's a film that rewards multiple viewings. Then you have After Hours, which I think is just a full-on comedy. It's one of my favorite kinds of films. It's like, a one crazy night sort of film. In New York, we have Griffin Dunn, who's this character who doesn't really want to go out a whole lot, but he gets this call and that compels him by this girl. I think played by, I don't remember who actually. But anyway, it's him going on really what's interesting is that it's just one kind of big block area, and as the night escalates, just sort of the trouble that he gets himself into. It's so much fun to watch, and I think really that with this Criterion release, if people weren't familiar with it before, because it's not just a DVD before. I remember getting actually the DVD of this at like a Walmart, and like, gosh, whenever that DVD came out. At least not long after that. But yeah, just so happy this is finally coming out. Undoubtedly during the sale. If you haven't seen this film, make this a priority, because I don't think you'll regret it. I think this is just one of just Scorsese's best films, and it's always great to have Griffin Dunn in the film, especially in a leading role like this. I remember like An American Werewolf in London and other films, but yeah, he's fantastic in this. Another 4K upgrade coming from Shout Factory is The Burning from 1981. I remember there was always a running debate whether or not this was better than Friday the 13th or not. They both came out around the same time. I think Friday the 13th was 81 as well, or at least it was very soon, but they're both summer camp slashers. You have this disfigured kind of characters going around and killing people and all that. And I know when Friday the 13th is a different thing, I'm just saying. But The Burning I haven't seen probably about 5-10 years or so. It's never been one that it's always been a favorite, but I know it's a big cult film for sure, and Cropsey as a character is so iconic. But I remember, this is me remembering from however long ago, I remember it being a little too slow at times, but and the raft scene is great, but it's almost like you kind of, I don't know, I kind of wanted more throughout the film. I kind of like the violence spread rather than one big scene, which is an incredibly well done scene. But either way, I mean, it's coming, and definitely during the sale, of theirs, I would not mind grabbing this for sure, but it's not a priority, at least at the moment. Invaders from Mars is coming to 4K, the 1953 film from Ignite Films, and I mention this because an acquaintance of mine got this in the mail to review, and I don't know what Ignite Films are. I don't know how this is going to look on this. I've not seen this film. Tobe Hooper did a remake of this in the 80s, which I have on, or at least I had on a midnight double feature DVD, one of the Warner Brothers ones that, I don't know where that went. But that's coming on this day. And Mary Pickford and Johanna and Lisks from 1918, which the Queen's Mind said was good. At least I think I remember he said it was good, so I guess I want to give that some attention as well there. That might be it for that day. Okay, so moving back over into the UK not on that day, on July 17th, from Arrow Video as well. Bruce Lee at Golden Harvest in 4K. This is getting 2 editions. I think, to my knowledge, they're the same editions, just different artworks. One's an Arrow UK exclusive, and one's just a general exclusive. But these films include The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, The Way of the Dragon, Enter the Dragon, Game of Death, and Game of Death 2. And they're all in 4K, except for Game of Death 2, I believe. And these films have been released together before. I don't know what company put it out, but there was a company that put out, I remember I had the DVD of it, of all of them except for Enter the Dragon. And then Criterion released them all on Blu-ray a couple years ago, and now we're getting them again. And importantly, this includes the English and the Mandarin versions of the film, which the Criterion release does not. And also, Enter the Dragon is getting 4K next month, I believe, in the States from Warner Brothers. So I don't know if that's the same transfer or not. It looks like this one has HDR. I would imagine that one does too. But yeah, I've watched all these films. All of them I think are good. Even like Game of Death is an interesting film. I don't know if it's exactly it's only worth watching if you're already a Bruce Lee fan and you're curious about the film itself. I mean, famously, it never got completed. They kind of put it together, and they do some just wild tactics in the first part of the film. To like the first 20 minutes or so, they really just like they show like old stock footage. I always remember they put like, I don't know what they did. They put like a cutout of his face in a mirror, and they have the actor like position himself, and he do like a double take. Like, something doesn't look right, man. But interestingly, what I think is always kind of left out that isn't talked about as much is that Game of Death 2, which also uses footage from Bruce Lee's previous films and stuff, including some footage from his funeral. But Game of Death 2 is a really solid film. That one is really not talked about, and the third act of that film almost plays out like a video game. It's sort of like he's going into like this. I always remember it was a tower built upside down, which however that works, but it's just great, like going through these rooms. It's like a room of like acid and stuff, and it's really cool, man. That I feel like is always overshadowed, like, oh yeah, Game of Death 2, whatever. But yeah, if you get that release, man, do not skimp on Game of Death 2. But Big Boss, Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, and Enter the Dragon are all solid films as well. I mean, I don't know which is my favorite of the bunch. Maybe I can't even think. Maybe Fist of Fury. I really don't know. But we'll probably upgrade to this. I was pretty, when this first got announced, I was really like dead set on upgrading it. And I think I still will, but I don't know if I'm going to pay full price for it just yet. But that's coming out on that day. So it looks like it might be it for that day. The Radiant Films titles I'm not familiar with. The Iron Perfect and Thieves Like Us I have not seen, and OC and Stigs. So on the US on that day, on July 18th, we have William Friedkin's To Live and Die in L.A. coming to 4K from 1985 from Kino Lorber. This previously had a release from Shout Factory, and what a great film this is, man. I saw this a little bit later, at least maybe like last year or so, but in terms of Friedkin's work, man, this is just such a great film. I remember a coworker of mine, this was like the first film that I brought up, and we kind of like bonded over our love for this film. But yeah, I never got that Blu-ray that Shout Factory put out, so this will be grabbed for sure. As well as coming from Arrow is another Martin Scorsese film, Hugo in 4K from 2011. I've only seen this film once. I remember liking it, but I remember not leaving a huge impact on me. But I actually have the Blu-ray of this in the other room that don't know if I'll upgrade or not. But the big one for me on this day, which will definitely be grabbed for sure, is the Random Westerns, which is the Bud Bedecker, Randolph Scott Westerns in 4K. This is the Tall T, Decision at Sundown, Buchanan Rides Alone, Ride Lonesome, and Comanche Station. I've seen Ride Lonesome and Buchanan Rides Again. I don't know if I've seen The Tall T. I actually want to look if I've seen that film or not. That does not sound familiar. Ride Lonesome is a great, great film that I watched on TCM at least sometime this year or last year, I think. Have I seen The Tall T? I do not remember. No, I guess I haven't. But my acquaintances on Letterboxd gave it pretty high reviews. And Buchanan Rides Alone, I think I watched it for 1958, but also it's a very enjoyable film. Yeah, I just really cannot wait to get this set. This will definitely be grabbed. Another 4K upgrade from Criterion as well is Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, an extremely influential French New Wave film. This really kind of became synonymous with Godard's style, the way he edited, the way he shot his actors. This stars Gene Steinberg and as well John Paul Belmondo. And I've talked about before, I really would like to rewatch this because the first time that I had seen it, I think I knew a lot of the tropes of a lot of French New Wave films, and to me, this kind of checked the boxes of those, and ultimately I ended up not liking it. But I think it's an unfair kind of analysis, whereas now that I'm more aware of, I've seen far, far, far more French New Wave films than when I initially saw it, and especially getting a stronger love for Godard and his work, and just seeing some of his later work. And I think I saw this, and I saw Masculine and Feminine, I think a little bit later, and those two films kind of didn't really sit well with me in terms of just not being very good films. But then when I saw some of his other work, in retrospect, I think it makes me appreciate those films more. So I don't know if I'm going to be upgrading this or not. I probably won't, but I would definitely, above all else, it definitely is keeping it in mind to watch again. Let's see, Gloria from 1980 is getting a Kino Lorber release with Jenna Rollins. I think this was, I don't know what year Cassavetes died, but I think this was one that she did after he died. I really don't know. But I've heard some good things about this film. At least I'm getting the correct film. I don't know. But anyways, that's coming from Kino Lorber regardless. And then back in the UK on July 24th, from Second Sight, we have two releases here. May from 2002. I don't know if this is a 4K or not. I think this might be a Blu-ray. And Frontiers from 2007. Both these films, Frontiers had a DVD from that was part of the After Dark Horror Fest, and then May, I think, was stuck on DVD. I think it may have had a Blu-ray elsewhere. I really don't know. Frontiers is one I've been waiting for a while, though. That's what, I've heard the comparisons to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it pretty much is that. It's this during these political kind of riots and protests, these kids, they go up to this abandoned kind of not even a hostel. It's like a bed and breakfast sort of place, but things escalate really quickly. And I remember the first time that I saw this film, it really left a big impact on me. I thought the tension in this film, the horror was really wild. The ending never really sat well with me. I think it kind of loses sort of its tension in the ending, becomes a different kind of film. But I mean, of the French Extreme films, this was probably my favorite for a while. I don't know if it still is or not. I haven't seen Martyrs or Inside in a long time, but I'm just glad this is finally getting a Blu-ray. This had a French Blu-ray as well, but there were no subtitles on it because I tried to import it a little while ago. But those two films are coming along with Magic Cop from 88 Films, which I have not seen, and it might actually be it on that day. I just want to scroll down here and see if there's anything else that comes to mind. Yeah, it looks like that might be it for that day. So, all right, back in America, scroll down here. On July 25th, we have the Vinegar Syndrome titles that were part of the Halfway to Black Friday sale, which are now becoming available everywhere else. Showgirls, The Boogeyman, Undefeatable, Night Screams, and the Village of the Damned box set, as well as the partner label titles as well. Shame, How to Be Loved. Shame is actually a very cool film. I bought that, and then I didn't realize I already saw it. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I saw that film. On this day, World War Z is getting a 4K from Shout Factory. Interesting title from The Do. It's less of a cult film and more of just like a kind of big studio film. But I guess I've done that before with some of their other big studio films. One False Move is coming to Criterion in 4K from 1992. I thought I'd seen this film, but I guess not. This is Bill Paxton. Let's see here. Billy Bob Thornton in the film. Yeah, I thought that I don't know what I was confusing this with, but I thought I'd seen that film, but I hadn't. Also, Facts coming to 4K from Agfa. I think this was the first 4K. This is part of the partner label titles from Vinegar Syndrome. This had a previous Agfa Blu-ray. I think this was their first Blu-ray, which it's a cool film. I don't know if I'd upgrade it to 4K, but it's an interesting period piece nonetheless. And I say period piece in terms of when it was made. It was Romero's kind of Philadelphia kind of crew making this film. And it's a cool film, but I mean, ultimately, I don't know if it's worth upgrading or not. War of the Worlds coming to 4K. Again, I thought this already had a 4K. Maybe not. I thought this had a 4K with When Worlds Collide, but maybe I'm mistaken. I'm really not sure. Severin Films is releasing their long overdue box set of the Sensual World of Black Emmanuel. This has all the Black Emmanuel films, as well as the ones that I think are considered Black Emmanuel films, but are not named Emmanuel. I don't know if this includes like Violence in Women's Prison and the other film I'm blanking on, but this has like Emmanuel and the Deadly Black Cobra, which was just, I don't remember what it was called, but there was that film, and then there's a couple other films included that, like the ones that Full Moon put out, I don't think were originally Emmanuel films. They were just Laura Gemser films. But like when it comes to ones like Violence in Women's Prison, which is not really an Emmanuel film, but it's this character who's a journalist who is going undercover in this prison, so it kind of is that. A lot of this is being hyped up for a while. Black Emmanuel has had some overseas releases to my knowledge, but the sequels I don't know if they have had or not. But this is, I mean, if there was a release of the month, it'd be this for me. I've been waiting for this release for a while when it finally got announced. So it's just such a great announcement to hear. So that's coming from them, and a regular Blu-ray. The rest of the OCN titles. Funny Ha Ha 2002, which I don't actually know if I've talked about before, but I think it's a great film. Graveyard Live, Therapy Dogs. On the final day in the UK, on July 23rd, previously delayed, is the Andrzej Zulawski 3 films collection, which includes The Third Part of the Night, The Devil, and On the Silver Globe. I have not seen these films. I actually had the opportunity to see On the Silver Globe theatrically a couple years ago, and I didn't, and I kind of wish I did. Twin Dragons, I think, also got delayed as well. I thought I had talked about this a while ago, maybe not. Cross Virum's coming to 4K. That's coming to 4K as well in the States, I believe, at some point. Following, coming from Black Label, this is Christopher Nolan's debut film from 1998. I think, very low budget film. Very interesting film. I just watched this a little while ago, and it's one that I like to rewatch. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I remember liking it enough, in context. But looks like that might be it for that day. So, a bit of a slower month, admittedly, but this is also a good opportunity because with the Criterion and Arrow sales happening at Barnes & Noble, it's a good opportunity to catch up on titles that you were not able to get before. Like I said, like the Past Lane you said just came out from Criterion, so it's a good time to get it, and After Hours you can get now. So yeah, a little bit of a slower month, but overall good titles nonetheless, like every other month. So those are there. Thank you for listening, and be back next month for more Blu-rays.